Millennials, ugh. What do you hate most about millennials? We all know the digs. Lazy, disloyal, self-obsessed, and the big one, entitled. I'm not gonna argue with you about self-obsessed, but first, let me get a selfie. But I actually think that millennial women are game-changing rock star pioneers. I have dedicated my career to being their biggest cheerleader. I was editor-in-chief of 17. I launched 2 other teen magazines before that. I have watched this generation grow up and grow into their own power and potential. I am basically the Jane Goodall of millennials. I have watched them, I've observed them in their natural habitat since 1997. Still, I can understand how you'd be annoyed. It's not all about them. It's about you too. About a year ago, I was giving a speech at a millennial women's organization. And during the Q&A session at the end, a woman stood up in the back of the room. She was in her mid-40s, neatly dressed for a Saturday, hair perfectly coiffed, a little silk scarf tied at her neck. And she said, "It seems like millennials are all that anyone can talk about these days. How does someone like me, who is not a millennial and who is not at the beginning of her career, not get lost in the conversation?" It's a question that all of us has asked at some point in time, and probably not as nicely as that woman in Rhode Island. It can seem like millennials take up all the air in the room. But the truth is, I think that we should all be more millennial. And actually, I think that you are more millennial than you think. Flashback with me to 2007. That was the year that I became editor-in-chief of 17, and it was the year of Lauren Conrad. Everyone under 25 wanted to be blonde and tan and drive their Mercedes SUV through Southern California, going shopping and drinking giant frappuccinos. And it's not that young women weren't ambitious. It's just that they assumed they'd be successful. I mean, after all, the economy was booming and affluence seemed easy. Fast forward a few years, and we had a terrible recession, and suddenly we were shopping in our closets and making our cappuccinos at home. And an entire generation of young women just on the verge of coming into their own had the financial rug pulled out from under their feet. Parents were laid off. College wasn't a sure thing. Jobs were nearly impossible to find. But rather than see their horizons get smaller, this generation of young women was mobilized. They got internships in high school. They started businesses in college. And they voraciously reached out to women in positions of power and influence for tips on how to achieve and succeed. I could see it from where I was sitting at 17, because suddenly I was bombarded with messages for advice, not fashion advice, not beauty advice, business advice. I mean, there was a terrible recession when I got out of college too, but my generation, Gen X, we were the slackers. And we got Mick jobs, which were low-paying jobs at McDonald's or coffee shops, to tide us over until the economy right-sided. Millennial women see work differently. And now that they're in their 20s and 30s, they are changing the way work works for everyone, forever. This always-on nature of social media that they grew up with means that they are demanding candor and transparency in everything, which feels like TMI to you and I. But that transparency, especially salary transparency, is going to get us all closer to equal pay. That's right. And this generation of young women doesn't want to sit still and wait to get promoted. They don't want to move up, up, up in a straight line. They want twists and turns and adventure. And when young women demand freedom from FaceTime in the office, from endless meetings that go nowhere, from regular hours of 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 9 to 9, That's getting us all closer to a conversation about how work and life can work together. And most importantly, this generation has replaced this old idea of competition among women with collaboration. There's this dusty old idea that there's room at the table for one woman, and you had to wait until that woman got up or fell over or died to get her spot. But now that there's more room at the table, millennial women are making room and bringing their friends along with them. They are devoted to helping each other achieve and succeed. This is their sisterhood. This is their squad. There is no doubt that work is changing for everyone, particularly for women, and millennials are leading the way. But I will tell you a secret. They're not that different than you. For the last couple of years, as I was researching my book about millennial women, I had a series of dinners at my apartment. Dinner is overstating it. It was fancy frozen pizza and many bottles of rosé. I don't cook. And I started every single dinner with the same question. If I could solve any problem for you, what would it be? And so dozens of dinners later, with hundreds of women around my table, you would think there'd be hundreds of answers to this question. But the same 5 things came up again and again. How do I find a career that feels like a passion? How do I get respect from my bosses? How will I find an equal partner? How will I balance work and children? And will all this struggle be worth it? Sound familiar? These are the same challenges, the same fears, the same anxieties that we had. And so, when you say lazy, I say millennials are having a strategic deployment of resources. I mean, why get up and walk across town when you've got TaskRabbit? And when you say disloyal, I ask, are companies loyal to their employees, period? And when you say entitled, I say absolutely. They deserve everything, and so do we. You don't have to like them or the changes that they are leading in our culture, in our work, in our lives. But if you do not embrace these changes, you could be left behind. But if we follow their lead, anything is possible. About 3 years ago, when I was at 17, I got a call to see my boss on the 42nd floor of Hearst Tower. The carpets up there are unbelievably soft. And the chairs are very, very uncomfortable. And you know the meeting's not going to be a good one when the head of human resources is already sitting there. And then my boss lowered the boom. In the face of declining fortunes, the magazine was being restructured. The staff would be slashed in half, and my contract was not going to be renewed. And in that moment, I had 2 crystal clear thoughts. This sucks. And 2, this is probably going to be great for me. I mean, to be honest, I knew it was coming. The industry had been struggling for years, and so it hurt, but it wasn't a surprise. And I'd been doing this job for the better part of a decade. And so I was actually excited to see what else was out there. But then something weird happened. As I was saying my goodbyes, a woman, a senior editor at another magazine, pulled me aside to say how sorry she was. And she said, "This could have happened to any of us. This could have happened to me. I'm just trying to hang on for 20 more years until I can retire." 20 more years. This woman was my age. She had 20 years of her career behind her and 20 years of her career ahead of her. When did we lose that feeling of possibility? When do we start to wind down rather than feel excited about the next adventure? Take it from millennials. There is no hanging on. You can't lock yourself in your office and hope that nobody ever asks you to leave. There are no offices anymore. You have to embrace the twists and turns and adventure. We all need a side hustle that is going to keep us engaged and feeling young and hungry and ambitious so we never feel stuck. I am living my life as millennially as possible. I am being transparent about my wins and my losses. I am enjoying the freedom that comes with setting my own schedule rather than feeling terrified at the lack of a traditional corporate structure. And I am relying on my sisterhood, who have had my back at every single twist and turn. We are all being asked to reinvent ourselves for lives that are longer and more unpredictable than we ever expected. And it makes sense to take our cue from a generation that is reinventing how we all work and live. Millennials are leading the way for us to have lives that are richer and bigger and more meaningful than ever before. And that rich, big, meaningful life isn't just for them. It's ours for the taking. I will give you the advice that I gave to that woman that day in Providence. This moment of change is an opportunity for every woman, millennial or not, to make her life bigger, rather than making the force of change make you feel small. You have a choice to be the architect of change or to let change happen to you. Take the reins. Thank you.